Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the difference between offers and threats. Now, offers and threats can be conceived of very similarly, and defining the differences can be more challenging than it might appear at first. In both, someone is given the choice of an exchange. However, there are important philosophical differences between an offer and a threat. In terms of morality, offers are generally permissible, while in many cases, threats are unethical or impermissible. With respect to metaphysics, some would argue that you have free will when you're presented with an offer, but you don't when you're presented with a threat because you're being coerced. In this video, we're going to cover the distinctions between offers and threats, as well as the ethical and metaphysical consequences of whatever distinction we pick. So, while we may conceive of them as clearly different things, offers and threats seem to have a lot in common when you try to define them explicitly. Whether a salesman is offering to sell you a new miracle drug that makes you live longer, or a mugger is telling you to choose between your money or your life, at their heart, offers and threats mean someone is being offered a choice. In both of these instances, someone is offering a choice at longevity in exchange for money. Admittedly, that death date may come sooner in the case of the mugger, but it's the same basic concepts that are at play. Are you willing to give up some money to live a little bit longer? And you are being given a choice. Either pay the person or risk dying sooner. What then sets a threat apart from an offer? If all of these key elements are the same, what is it that makes something a threat? There are several possibilities. One possibility, perhaps, is that harm by the offerer is intended. Under one view, a threat occurs when one of the choices leads to the person making the exchange doing you harm. So, it's a threat because the mugger is the one that would reduce your lifespan, whereas in the case of the salesman, it would be old age that would be killing you, or a disease that this drug supposedly would combat, not the salesman themselves. And so because it's that person that is causing the harm to you, they're making a threat, whereas when it's something else that might be causing you harm, it's not. However, instances where someone threatens to not intervene seem to still be threats. Imagine someone is dangling off the edge of the roof of a building and you say, "Give me the code to the safe or I won't save you." You're not the one doing the harm. Maybe the person ended up on that ledge of their own free will and you just came along and are aware that they have a safe. But this still seems like a threat. This doesn't seem like a genuine offer. It seems like you are threatening to let them die, even if you're not going to be the one that kills them. And so that distinction between killing and letting die has all sorts of other ethical consequences, but here it seems to be problematic because it seems that threatening to let someone die isn't really an offer. It seems to still feel like a threat, even if you're not the one causing the harm. But the salesman letting you die by not selling you the medication doesn't seem to be the same situation. Perhaps then it's a question of choice. When someone is threatening you, there's a sense in which you don't have a choice, in the same way you do when someone is offering you something. You can't really choose, "Oh, well, I guess I'll just die." That doesn't feel like it's the same kind of a choice. You can always close the door on the salesman, but can you really walk away from someone that's threatening to kill you? No, you don't have the ability to walk away from the choice. If in one option you don't survive, do you really have a choice? Many would say no. However, this seems to have some issues. Say your boss threatens to fire you if you don't perform sexual favors for him. It seems you really do have a choice here. You could walk away from the job. And no matter what, you're probably going to be alive. And if you're secure in your career and your finances, maybe being fired is a real choice that you can take. However, few would say that this is just an offer and not a threat. It seems that your boss is really threatening you here, even though you do seem to have a real viable choice where both of the options are in some way live. Even if neither of them would be particularly preferable. Similarly, with an offer, you might say that I really like my money, but I also like living a long time, and so either buying the drug or not is in some way not preferable. Maybe then the correct answer is whether or not saying no maintains the status quo. In an offer, if you say no, nothing changes. But with a threat, something changes if you refuse, whether that's losing your life or losing your job. When I say no to the salesman, I'm still going to live as long as I was going to live before. But if I say yes, maybe I get some benefit and I lose some money. Again, dangling from a building, though, poses problems, as the status quo is that you will die, which would be maintained if you said no to the offer. And so once again, it seems like an offer, not a threat to just let you die. If you argue that the status quo there is that you are alive, and saying no will lead to a different status quo because you would die, even though that was kind of the path you were on to begin with, you're going to run into issues when you have situations like a patient that's refusing treatment for a life-threatening disease, something that seems like an offer, but saying no will similarly lead to a change in the status quo where the patient goes from being alive to dying. This is resolved if you say, well, the patient was on a path towards death. It doesn't change their path towards death. Well, then refusing to pull someone up onto the roof is keeping them on their same path. They were on a path towards death. And so those two situations under this status quo model have to either both be defined as offers or both be defined as threats. Either situation seems uncomfortable. Moving on, I don't know if there's a clear definition, but these terms do have real impact, and they're used in ethical and metaphysical discussions. It seems that offers are ethically innocuous. Many people would say that they are morally permissible. Making an offer to anyone of saying, would you take this for that, seems allowable. However, threats seem much more morally complicated. A mugger threatening to take your life if you don't give them money seems immoral, but a government threatening to take your life or maybe imprison you if you commit mass murder seems, to many, ethical. Arguments about corporal punishment aside. If you're concerned about the corporal punishment questions, just imagine this government imprisoning you. Either way, the government's still threatening you to a certain degree. A parent threatening to take away a child's phone temporarily if the child uses it to bully and harass others online seems not just permissible, but verging on morally obligatory. But when a friend is threatening to take another adult's phone away for the same reason, this seems problematic at best. In what situations is a threat morally wrong? Because it does seem that there are some situations where a threat is morally permissible. And other situations where a threat is wrong. And so what are the situations where a threat is permissible? I don't know, but would love to hear your thoughts. Next, there are also impacts of this debate on metaphysics. Some compatibilists, see our series on free will for more, argue that you are only acting freely when you are not coerced. Some claim that threats are a type of coercion, where offers are not, and therefore you cannot act freely if you are threatened. Given the challenges with defining a threat versus an offer that we discussed earlier, one might be worried that this is just passing the buck from free will. Oh, free will's hard to define, so we'll talk about coercion. Well, coercion's hard to define, so we'll talk about threat. And then threat, as we just saw, is actually pretty hard to define itself. And we're simply moving from one poorly defined concept to another, and this isn't going to resolve the underlying questions. But others might argue that even when you are threatened, you are still free to choose. A soldier that's running into gunfire at the threat to her life seems to be freely choosing something, even if she's under threat. In fact, claiming that such a choice is not free seems in some way to rob her of the moral valor she should receive for such bravery. We shouldn't say that she was not free when she was making that choice. If anything, that was a very free choice she was making, and she should get the moral good or the moral positives from doing something that's brave even despite being under threat. And so in some ways, when you are under threat, you are more free than other situations, poking some holes and some problems in the compatibilist's argument. Finally, there are interesting questions that arise within the world of work. At what point does a job offer go from an offer to a threat? It seems like if you're very financially stable, you have many different job offers, they really do feel like offers. But in many places around the world, that's not the case. If there's only one job that you can get, one job in your small town or your small village, and you need that job to survive or to feed your family, is that really an offer? Or is it a threat to just let you die just as surely as if you were not helped off the ledge? What if that job is dangerous? Is it still an offer? What if that job is prostitution or something that you personally find morally reprehensible? What makes an offer different like that, different from the boss that's offering to give you a promotion for sexual favors? If workers must get a job to eat, but cannot negotiate their working conditions, is that really an offer? Or are they in some way being forced to take it because there's not a real other choice? Once again, as we discussed with the possibility of choice, it seems like when the other option is you die, it doesn't feel like an offer in some ways. In a more white-collar world, is a boss saying that you need to come in on the weekend to work or you're fired an offer or a threat? Does it depend on how much money you're making? Does it depend on your own financial stability? And if it's a threat, is your boss ethically in the wrong for making such a threat? Or are they allowed to in the same way that governments are allowed to threaten to throw you in prison? I don't know. But there are a lot of interesting questions, particularly around the world of work and these power dynamics of where something would shade from an offer into a threat and where something would shade from something that is morally permissible to something that's morally impermissible. What do you think? I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I'm a skeptic, a philosophical skeptic, so I don't know, but I would love to hear your thoughts and your engagement in the comments. How can we define the difference between threats and offers? In what situations is a threat immoral, and in what situations is it moral? Can you freely choose if you are being threatened? And are there working situations where even a job offer or a job requirement is in some way a threat? And do those depend on the working situation or your personal financial situation and your alternative options? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org and stay skeptical, everybody.